If you are a DC Comics fan like myself, you are in the worst era in the history of DC Comics. Can you believe it? It would have actually been worse if Dan DiDio wasn't fired. We are getting a lot of the ideas that were promised for Generation 5, 5G, whatever you want to call it. Most of those ideas were truncated, put into future state, and then we got a really watered down, regurgitated, really weird version of 5G that sucked, but it was only 3 months long. So it wasn't the years-long initiative that Dan DiDio wanted. But we have had a lot of these stupid ideas incorporated into Infinite Frontier, and they're still driving the DC Comics universe forward, going into Dawn of DCU. Bleeding Cool has been talking about 5G for a very long time now, and yesterday they came out with the 5G files. Mostly it's just like stock here, and then a little bit of new information in the middle. I've decided, because I'm your friend and I want to do you a solid, to cut out all the BS and just get to the stuff where it's talking about what would have changed. And wouldn't you know it, I have some ideas on just how bad 5G would have been, and I definitely will point out where we got what 5G was supposed to be right here, right now in DC Comics. He starts out talking about what would happen with Batman. Alfred died in the City of Bane storyline in Batman in 2019. However, in this version of events, the funeral drove the Bat family apart rather than pulling them together. Specifically, Lucius Fox would offer support to Batman at the expense of his son Luke Fox. The following storyline, which would later become the Joker War, was called Batman Joker: The Final Conflict, which then writer James Tynion has talked about. The Joker's assault on Gotham leads Batman to decide to stop Joker once and for all, especially after having only just lost Gotham and Alfred to Bane. Batman defeats the Joker and traps him, but in a final twist, Batman lets the Joker go after the Joker whispers something in Batman's ear. It is later revealed to be a promise that if Batman let him go, the Joker would go and kill Bane for revenge of the death of Alfred Pennyworth. And he is the only one who could do it. First of all, he's not the only one that could do it. Batman could absolutely kill Bane if he wanted to. Superman could kill Bane if he wanted to. Batman has access to an entire league of assassins that could kill Bane if they wanted to. So that's kind of ridiculous right there. But the idea that the final conflict between Batman and Joker would end with Batman finally having Joker, who's going to end the conflict, and then let him go after what he did to, I don't know, Jason Todd, Barbara Gordon, and other prominent members of the Bat family because he promised a little bit of revenge is absolutely ridiculous. Would that have broken Batman? I would think it would have probably broken Batman. Nobody would have bought that. Jim Gordon just going off to kill Bane in that Joker miniseries, which I imagine James Tynion got inspiration for that story from these things that never took place in the DC Comics, was bad enough that Batman would have let him go and do that. Well, I guess it was Barbara, but certainly Batman would have had an idea about that. It's just stupid. This is a really bad idea. I'm glad it didn't happen. Certainly we did get the Joker War, which wasn't very good. And you can tell, and it's not surprising, that James Tynion had to do a lot of rewrites and reworks on the story. Would the death of Alfred Pennyworth really tear the Bat family apart? I just don't see that happening. They've been together for a really long time. They've experienced a lot of loss, so I don't know. Do you see Batman just letting the Joker go for a little bit of revenge? After what he's done to Jason Todd, the torment that he's put Batman through, the torment that he put Barbara Gordon, Jim Gordon, and everyone else through, and just the sheer amount of people that Joker has murdered in Gotham to this day, insignificant is the amount of people Bane has killed compared to Joker. Let's just put it that way. That never would have worked. He then goes on to talk about Superman. Superman has revealed his identity to the world, but in Superman Revealed, he would have begun pressuring other heroes to follow his lead, especially Batman. This pressure created division and dissent within the ranks of the Justice League, some intrigued by Superman's suggestions, some already out in the public, some fearing for their family, and some, like Batman, dead set against it. The mystique of Batman being almost a superpower in itself. This also caused a division with John Kent as well, as Clark Kent's revelation has put a spotlight on him. And he continues to take refuge in the 31st century with the Legion of Superheroes as a means of escape, and ultimately, the division would have led to the dissolution of the Justice League. Wow, let's just copy more Marvel Comics ideas. And the idea that the Justice League would just like disintegrate and fall apart because Superman is pressuring other people to reveal their secret identities is pretty stupid. I understand Superman is a hero and he's got his own agenda. Revealing his identity was always stupid. They obviously had to undo that, but that leading to this major fallout within the DC Comics universe is just stupid. It just tells you how out of touch Dan DiDio and Brian Michael Bendis really were, not only with Superman, but with DC fans in the DC universe. Brian Michael Bendis did a lot of damage to Superman. Not going through with this probably didn't fix anything. In fact, I would say right now, Superman's just in as bad a state as he would have been had they gone through with that. I just don't think that you can put Superman in a worse way than he was in 2022. It probably can never get worse for Superman in comic books than last year. Like, it was just truly awful. Everything outside of Warworld Saga just was really bad. They did not know what they were doing. They dropped the ball spectacularly. It started with Bendis, and it sounds like he would have kept it going. Speaking of Bendis, The Last Call, a series that would have given a run around the DC Comics universe before the big change, it would have taken the DC universe into the 5G reality by looking at details of the DC timeline and how it would be playing out with the new characters. DC Comics was looking at a Portland team of Brian Michael Bendis, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Matt Fraction, and Greg Rucka as joint writers, echoing the original 52 series. But with the canceling of 5G, The Last Call never got the call. And we can all thank our lucky stars for that. I don't think anyone has ever brought into DC Comics like a big superstar acquisition that misunderstood the universe and characters worse than Brian Michael Bendis. Every single thing that man did at DC Comics failed, including bringing all of his dumbass friends from Marvel over to DC as well. Not one of them really made a standout contribution to DC Comics. Probably the best thing that happened was Matt Fraction's Jimmy Olsen run. Matt Fraction absolutely sucks. I understand some people seem to like his Hawkeye run. Go back and actually read it again. What you're going to read is just the same thing you've been reading for the last 5 years. It just showed up 2 or 3 years earlier than everyone else, ruining characters everywhere. But if you're going to put Matt Fraction on a character, he should be on Jimmy Olsen or some other character that just doesn't matter to the big picture at DC or Marvel Comics. So I think that was a good place to hide that guy. If you read Wonder Woman Historia, Hysterectomy, whatever you want to call it, from Kelly Sue DeConnick, that thing was absolute embarrassment. But nothing is more embarrassing than Brian Michael Bendis. That guy having his own Portland Mafia write anything from DC. The fact that it didn't get published is the best thing that happened. Out of 5G getting canceled, is that ended, and Brian Michael Bendis is no longer at DC Comics. The Death Metal event would have been originally called Death Metal Dark Crisis for the summer of 2020, but Scott Snyder talked about pushing back to get that change, rather choosing to call it an anti-crisis. The ending of Death Metal would have set up 5G and would have followed in the autumn with another crossover event planned to be called The Changing of the Guard, featuring Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman prominently. Death Metal would have ended with Batman and Superman aged up into their 60s, reflecting the new DC timeline that had already been established under Wonder Woman as a wartime hero who inspired the Justice Society of America. The Changing of the Guard would have focused on the replacement characters taking on the mantle of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, John Kent, Luke Fox, and Yara Flor. Well, essentially, we got that. That's what Dark Crisis was. They didn't do it exactly like it was originally planned, but Dark Crisis is the changing of the guard. They didn't age up the heroes to 60 years old, but they certainly tried to hand over the mantles of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, all those characters. And guess what? It's not going to work. We are going to get this Teen Titans or Titans series, probably written by Tom Taylor, where Nightwing takes over as the leader of the team. John Kent gets on there. Yara Flor gets on there. Now Jace Fox, because they changed plans on Luke Fox. It was never going to work. It wasn't going to work in Death Metal Dark Crisis. And I have news for Scott Snyder. You did not write the Anti-Crisis. You just wrote a lame-ass crisis. You can call it Anti-Crisis all you want. Death Metal is just, it's a crisis. It led to a new status quo. And it certainly was the introduction of the Omniverse and everything in Infinite Frontier that's been destroying DC Comics for 2 years. So he plays a part in that. And then, you know, whatever, man. It was going to lead directly into 5G. It led directly into Infinite Frontier. And I don't think there was any way they could have salvaged that. Death Metal was going to suck one way or the other. Batman Last Days was a Batman comic event series that would have followed the events in Death Metal Dark Crisis. As the new DC timeline is established, Batman would now be 60. The age he would have been in Frank Miller and Klaus Jansson's Dark Knight Returns, and decided that he has to live a different life. He is forced to consider retirement, and in the process, making amends with those he has wronged, and let the Bat family, also aged up, to take over more of his role. But his decision earlier to let the Joker escape justice with the promise that Joker would murder Bane in retaliation for Bane's murder of Alfred Pennyworth, plays out. The Joker does indeed murder Bane, and the guilt hits Bruce Wayne like a wall. He decides to leave Gotham once and for all in search of redemption. As I said, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that James Tynion took some ideas from that and made his Joker miniseries, or maxi series, whatever you want to call it. Who gives a crap? Just what a stupid ending for Batman. He doesn't get to be happy. In the end, he's got a mistake that he'll never be able to get over because he let the Joker escape, which never would have made sense to begin with. I say if you really want to retire Batman without killing him, just let him get married and retire to an island to never be heard from again, to just be happy. Superman checks in on him from afar, but other than that, everyone basically leaves him alone. Don't bring him out of retirement. Just let the man sit on the beach and bang Catwoman. That should be his ultimate destiny after he makes amends and gets over his parents' death, which has taken an awful long time to get over. Let's just put it that way. Finally, we did hear about The Last Days of Superman, which was a Superman event series that also would have followed the events in Death Metal Dark Crisis. Superman would now be in his 60s and was discovering that his powers were fading. The series would see him passing the Superman role to his son John Kent as Clark Kent and Lois leave Metropolis and America as a whole to relocate to Africa. Truth, justice, in the African way. That is the most liberal 60-year-old white dude from Portland idea I've ever heard of. What does Superman need to do when he retires? He needs to move to Africa to rediscover himself. I'm not surprised Brian Michael Bendis came up with that. That's a terrible idea as well. This would be the ultimate fate for Superman. He certainly has humanity, but he is not human. And ultimately, I think he should have to deal with that. The ultimate fate for Superman should probably be not to really age at all and to watch Lois Lane slowly fade away and realize it's going to be a long time before he fades away as well, and having to get over with that, dealing with the loss of Lois Lane and understanding that everyone he's ever loved is going to be gone a lot sooner than he would. How is he going to deal with that? What is Superman going to do? Can he age gracefully? John Kent obviously is going to become the Superman of Earth, right? Does he go off like Philip Kennedy Johnson decided in the Superman lore that they put into Future State and stuff like that? I think that was a much more interesting fate for Superman and actually felt like it fit the character. Not that rubbish right there that was clearly out of Brian Michael Bendis, the most lame-ass writer of the last 10, 15 years. What an enormous mistake DC Comics made bringing that guy in. Probably, ultimately, I bet you that's what got Dan DiDio fired. Now, Dan DiDio didn't get fired specifically because the sales sucked, and they did suck. But there were a lot, and I do mean a lot of issues, a lot of fighting behind the scenes at DC Comics. When he brought in Brian Michael Bendis, there ended up being three big camps within DC Comics. The Bendis camp, the Scott Snyder camp, and the Tom King camp. And I guess there was a lot of politicking behind the scenes. And obviously, Bendis wasn't used to not winning all the time, specifically from his Marvel days. Scott Snyder certainly was the big man on campus at DC at the time. And Tom King had already fired editors at that point. He was supposed to be the next big thing in comic books. It was very heated behind the scenes at DC Comics, and I wouldn't be surprised if ultimately that is why Dan DiDio got fired and saved us from some of the worst fates imaginable for Superman, Batman, and just the DC Comics universe in general. I talked about how Future State was basically 5G with another coat of paint, and why it was already being doomed before it started with really bad creators. This might sound familiar because it's happening right now with Dawn of the DCU. Go back in the Wayback Machine, hear how I called it before it ever even started. Future State, Infinite Frontier was all doomed because of bad writers. Definitely check this video out here. If you don't see it there, there's a link in the video description.